Hi, boys and girls. I'm here to tell you another story again. My story is called Greater Love Hath No Woman. Well, Louise, she had lived with her mother and her father in China for years, and they had moved from place to place to place all around that great big country. And every new place they went to, little Louise learned to speak the dialect of that group of Chinese people. And she became very good at learning different languages. So when it was time for her to go to school and she had gotten older, she started learning more languages. So she was well versed in different parts of the world before it was time for them to leave China. Louise's father died, and her mother decided it was time for them to go back to America. So they did. And Louise continued her education there. Music, she learned singing, she learned all kinds of wonderful things and how to paint. And of course, she got regular education as well. Well, during this time, her mother married a new man, and he had also been a missionary, and he wanted to go back and be a missionary again. So Louise's mom went with her new dad to Africa. Well, by this time, Louise, in her heart, had decided that she wanted to be a missionary. So she went to school and she became a nurse. Well, that sounded like a really good thing to do as a missionary. You could help the people that were sick there. But then she was told, the places where they need the missionaries the worst, a lot of those places, they don't have any doctors. So the nurse can decide what's wrong with somebody and not have the ability to fix them. Maybe they need a surgery. So Louise made a decision that she was going to go back to college. And people go to college generally between the years of 18 and as old as I am, or till they're ready to die. So Louise, I don't know how old she was now, but she was old enough to go away as a missionary. And she had already taken 4 years of nursing. So she decided on a medical doctor missionary program that specialized in training nurses to basically be doctors. So she was going to go to college again, and she was going to have to live in the dorm. Well, she didn't know anybody there, so she was assigned a roommate. Well, before she went off to college, she got a letter from her new roommate, and her new roommate's name was Mary Smith. Well, that's a common sounding name, and there's a reason that the story calls her Mary Smith, because Mary had requested that nobody knew her name, her real name. So we will call her Mary. Well, Louise got a letter from Mary, and Louise was excited to meet Mary. She thought she sounds like she's great fun and she's into mission work. This'll be wonderful. Well, when they both got to college, the first several days at college, you learn where the cafeteria is, where the different classes are, you get your books, you get a counselor, you do all sorts of things, but it's not actually going to class. So finally the day came that was the first day of college for them, for this medical college business that Louise was going to take, and teaching, which is what Mary was going to take. Well, that evening, there is a block of time in the evenings that's set aside, even in college dorms, for study time. And each girl had their own little desk in that room that they lived in. Of course, they had their beds and their chairs and stuff, but they each had a study desk. And that first night, they were both studying away. And Louise, she kept looking over at Mary every so often. And she noticed Mary doing something really kind of strange. Mary would take out her book and she would read one page and she'd turn it and she'd read the next page and she'd turn it and she would keep reading. Well, after she had read about 3 pages, she set that book down and then she did something very, very odd. She closed her eyes really tight and she picked up a piece of paper and she felt with her hands to where the edges of that piece of paper were, all the time keeping her eyes closed. Then she reached down on her desk and she picked up a ruler. You guys all have rulers. Well, she took that ruler with her eyes closed. I'm going to try here. And she put that ruler along the front, the edge of the paper. She could feel that paper. And then she took her finger and she put her finger right below that ruler and she moved the ruler down. And as best as she could, she tried to make it level. And then she laid it down and she wrote all along the edge of that ruler. And then when it came time to write the next line, all this time her eyes were closed tight. She would put her finger there. She would move her ruler down. And notice, they're not necessarily straight, but it was the best she could do with her eyes closed. And she would start to write. Well, Louise thought, this is really odd. But then she remembered something. Remember that Mary had written her a letter, and there was something unusual about that letter. The words were about this tall. And you know, the older you get, generally the smaller you write, and the more distinctly you can write. Well, that letter had almost looked like a child had written it, but what was written wasn't like a child. It was like an adult. Well, Louise couldn't figure this out. And so several days went by, and one night Mary said, you know, I'm really tired. And Louise said, Mary, is there something wrong with your eyes? And Mary said, no, my eyes are fine. And then she realized, you know, Louise said, but what are you doing with your eyes closed on the paper? How are you writing on the paper? And she said, well, I have chosen a mission station. It's in Central America. And the people that live there are all Indians. And I have chosen to go there. And I wasn't forced to go there. I made the choice to go there. And we said, well, I'm glad you've chosen the place you want to go to. And, you know, Louise had told her that she'd been a missionary all her life with her parents. And now she was going back to be a doctor in Africa. Well, she really didn't explain what she was doing with that paper and that ruler. Well, time flies when you're going to school. And pretty soon, both girls graduated. And they each went. Louise went over here to Africa, and Mary went clear down to Central America. Well, several years passed, and finally it was time for Louise to come home from Africa on furlough. Now, furlough means you get basically a vacation from being a missionary. They get to come home for about a year generally. And Louise was looking forward to that, and she got home, and while she had been gone, her sister had married. And she said, "My husband and I are going to go to South America during part of the time that you're home. Would you like to come with us? I mean, it'll be fun, and then we'll get to spend some time together. Please come with me." And Louisa said, "Well, it sounds like fun. I'll get to see a different part of the country that I've ever seen." So the arrangements were made. Well, partway there, Louisa remembered Mary Smith, and she thought, "I have to go right straight by Central America. I can make arrangements and I can see Mary and I can see her mission station. Oh, this is wonderful." So Louisa wrote a letter to the mission board who had sent Mary to this certain place. She explained that they had been roommates in college, and she just really wanted to see Mary again. And she got a letter back from them, and they said, "You can meet Mary," and they gave the name of a city. Then they gave the name of a hotel. They said, "When Mary goes into the city, this is where she stays. And so you can meet her there at the hotel." Well, Louisa, who had been a missionary most of her life, realized that you seldom went to the big city. And she thought, "Why should I make Mary go all the way to the city when I can come to her?" So she wrote a letter directly back to Mary and said, "I'm coming such and such a date, and I'm going to come directly to your mission so I can see it." She immediately got a letter back, and it said, "Mary will be in the city during the time you're going to be here, and if you'd like to see her, meet her at this hotel." And Louisa thought, well, maybe she doesn't want me to see her mission station. Maybe there's some government rule why I can't go there. I guess I'll meet her at the hotel. So the time came, and Louisa went to that big city, and she found the hotel, and she went in and she arranged for a room, and she took her stuff up to her room, and then she came back down to the lobby, and she waited for Mary to come. Finally, out the window, she could see Mary getting out of a cab, and she was holding on to the arm of the man that had gotten out of the vehicle, the cab driver. Louisa thought, that's kind of strange. And Mary and the gentleman, they came in the lobby, and Mary registered. And then she turned around, and Louisa got up and she ran to her. She said, "Oh, Mary, I'm so glad to see you." But then she realized something. Mary was totally blind. She couldn't see Louisa. So they went over in the corner of the lobby to visit. And Louisa said, Mary, how long have you been blind? And she said, 4 years. Louisa said, tell me about it. So Mary started to talk. And she said, I told you that I specifically chose the mission station I wanted to go to. Nobody forced me to go there. But in that section of the country, they have a certain kind of black fly. And that fly, it bites people. It will bite your skin. It'll bite your face. It will bite your eyeballs. And when it bites, it leaves its little eggs, its larvae there. And those grow into little worms. And all the time that this is happening, which is a year to 18 months, you're not sick. But what's happening inside is each of those little eggs lay thousands more. And in this area, it especially attacks the eyes of the people. So everybody in that country has gone blind. Now, they're not blind when they're born, but they're blind after living there for a little while. And I knew that before I went there, because I knew somebody had to go there. And I made arrangements in New York City with scientists there. And I mailed them little cartons with live flies in them, little papers with dry flies, dead ones hooked on. I was able to get some of their eggs and the little worms, and I sent these all to New York City. And oh, Louisa, they have been able to figure out a medicine that will kill them. So all those other babies that are born won't have to be blind. And Louisa, I felt that one set of eyes was a small price to pay for a whole section of the country to be able to see again, and the next generations to come to not have this problem. I knew I was going to go blind. That's what I had been doing with that paper and the ruler, learning to make areas that I could write on. And I am so happy to still be there. Now I teach everybody about Jesus, the God that was willing to send his son to die for them. And now that I'm blind, they understand. I'm so excited. There's no way of curing the people that are already blind from it. But we can give medicine to all the other people, and they will never have to have that terrible disease that makes you blind. Boys and girls, cover your eyes. How would you like to go through life never seeing? Can you imagine choosing to not be able to see so someone else could? Someone had to go there and do that. But all those years and years and years, Nobody had been willing. Nobody had gone there to tell them about Jesus because they were afraid. And Mary had decided to give herself, her eyes, so that other people could learn about Jesus and she could help cure them so they would never have to be blind. Boys and girls, that is what Jesus did for us. Only he gave his whole self for us. Greater love hath no man, or in this case woman, than they give their life for another. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.